Claire Thompson never imagined her quiet Thursday evening in Seattle would turn into the moment her heart began to shake. But it all started the second her phone lit up with a message from her boyfriend Ethan Parker, a man she had trusted for 3 steady years, through job changes, long-distance weeks, and countless airport goodbyes. And at first the message looked harmless, maybe even silly, yet something about it made her stomach tighten as she read the words. "She loves when I lick her. Pink notebook cover. Says it's cute." Claire blinked twice, confused because Ethan never talked about anyone with a pink notebook and never used that playful tone with anyone except her. So her mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe it was a joke, maybe it was a coworker teasing him, maybe the message wasn't even meant for him. But deep inside she felt something she didn't want to name, something small and cold like a quiet alarm. She told herself not to overthink, not to create problems that might not exist, because Ethan worked long hours on his new project in Denver and often texted quickly between meetings, sometimes even copying messages into the wrong thread. But no matter how many excuses she created, the uneasiness stayed with her, sitting in her chest like a weight she could not move. She placed her phone down, walked toward her kitchen window, and stared at the rainy Seattle streets, telling herself to breathe, to stay calm, to trust the man she had loved for so long. But the words of the message kept replaying in her mind, refusing to fade into the background like she wished they would. Claire had always been the steady one, the one who didn't jump to conclusions, the one who believed communication could fix anything. But tonight even her calm nature felt cracked because the message wasn't just strange. It sounded personal, familiar, almost intimate in a way that didn't belong between Ethan and another woman, and the thought made her throat tighten. She tried distracting herself, opening her laptop to finish a small design project for her job, but every color she clicked reminded her of pink, of the mysterious notebook, of the softness in Ethan's tone, and soon she shut the laptop again, pressing her hands to her face as she tried to stop imagining scenarios that had no proof. She walked around her apartment restlessly, picking up a mug, putting it down, grabbing a blanket, dropping it again, because she hated the feeling of not knowing, of standing between trust and doubt with no clear direction. And when she finally heard another notification sound from her phone, her heart jumped so hard she almost didn't want to look. The message wasn't from Ethan this time. It was from the same unknown contact as before. A simple heart emoji followed by, "You're impossible." It didn't sound romantic exactly, but it didn't sound professional either. And Claire felt her chest slowly fill with a painful pressure. She wanted to call Ethan, demand answers, demand names, demand explanations he might not even expect to give. But another part of her feared what he might say, feared the possibility that this small crack in their relationship could become something bigger, something real. Instead of calling, Claire sent him a simple message. "Hey, how's your day?" Trying to sound normal, trying not to reveal the storm building inside her. But his reply came 30 minutes later and felt distant, rushed, like he was typing while walking or while talking to someone else. "Busy. Talk later." Those 2 short words, so ordinary on any other day, now felt like another clue she didn't want. She put her phone down slowly, her fingers trembling, and walked back to the window where the rain had turned heavier, streaking down the glass like a mirror to her mood. She wondered if she was imagining everything, if stress from her own workload was making her sensitive, if Ethan was simply having a long day and nothing more. But her instincts whispered that something had shifted, something small, but real, something she could no longer ignore. And because she couldn't pretend nothing had happened, she sat on her couch and replayed the last few weeks. The shorter calls, the distracted tone, the sudden excitement about working late, the way he said he was helping someone new at the office. Though he never gave details, and each memory felt like another piece sliding into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. Claire wasn't angry yet. She was scared of losing someone she had built dreams with, someone she once planned to move in with, someone who used to call her every night just to say he missed her voice. She whispered to herself that she needed the truth, no matter how painful it might be, because the worst feeling wasn't heartbreak. It was uncertainty, the space between knowing and not knowing, and tonight that space felt too wide to ignore. She finally picked up her phone and opened Ethan's contact, her thumb hovering over the call button. But before she pressed it, another notification arrived, and this time it wasn't accidental, not random, not confusing. It was a picture, not of anything inappropriate, not of a person, but of a pink notebook resting on a desk, covered with doodles and stickers, clearly personal, clearly used often. clearly belonging to someone who was comfortable sharing pieces of her life with Ethan. Claire stared at the image, feeling her pulse beat painfully in her ears, because this message didn't look like a mistake. It looked intentional, like someone sending something to someone she trusted. Her breathing turned shallow as she realized this wasn't about the notebook at all. It was about connection, about emotional closeness, about someone stepping into a space Claire once believed belonged only to her. And in that moment Claire understood something important. This wasn't proof of cheating, not in the dramatic way movies showed it, but it was proof of something unbalanced, something shifting, something that could break them if she didn't act. So she sat up straight, wiped her face, and whispered the decision out loud, as if speaking it would make her stronger. I need to know what's going on. She didn't know how she would ask, she didn't know how Ethan would react, but she knew this story was only beginning, and the truth, whatever it was now something she could no longer look away from. Claire couldn't stop thinking about the pink notebook and the messages as she walked through her day at the design studio, her mind racing faster than her steps as if each thought pushed her closer to a cliff she didn't want to fall from, and she tried to focus on her work, arranging colors and shapes on her screen, but everything felt muted, dull, and wrong because she couldn't get the image of that notebook out of her head, the playful tone of the messages echoing like a soft warning. And she kept glancing at her phone, expecting another message, hoping for nothing and fearing everything at the same time. Her best friend Mia noticed her distraction immediately during their lunch break at the small cafe down the street, her green eyes filled with concern as she asked, Claire, what's wrong? You look like you're carrying the weight of the world. And Claire hesitated, biting her lip, feeling her heart pound, knowing she couldn't lie to Mia, someone who had known her since college and understood her too well. So she showed her the messages, the first one about the pink notebook and the heart emoji that followed, and Mia's face softened, her brows knitting as she whispered, Claire, are you sure you're okay? This doesn't look good. And Claire felt a mix of relief and fear because telling Mia made the problem real, made it visible, made it no longer something she could ignore or pretend didn't exist. She told Mia she wasn't sure, that maybe it was innocent, maybe just a misunderstanding, but deep down she knew the unease she felt wasn't going to vanish, not tonight, not tomorrow, not until she confronted the truth. And as they walked back to the office, Claire's thoughts spun through every memory of Ethan, the late-night calls, the excitement in his voice when talking about his projects, the times he seemed distracted even when he was next to her, the way he sometimes laughed at things she didn't understand, the sudden mentions of helping someone new at work, all the little things that now added up in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she never wanted to complete, each one making the hollow pit in her stomach grow deeper. By the time Claire returned to her desk, she realized she could no longer sit and wait. She needed answers, she needed clarity, she needed to see for herself what was happening, and every message, every thought, every glance at her phone pushed her closer to a decision that frightened her because it meant crossing into uncertainty, leaving the comfort of distance, confronting a situation she wasn't sure she could handle, but ignoring it was no longer an option because the questions had grown too loud, too insistent, too real to dismiss with excuses or hope, so she booked a last-minute flight to Denver without telling Ethan, her hands trembling as she typed her information into the airline website, her heart racing with fear and anticipation, imagining what she might see, imagining the confrontation, imagining the answer she desperately wanted and feared. And even as she confirmed the ticket, a mix of adrenaline and dread made her feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that once she jumped, nothing could return to the way it was. On the flight, Claire stared out of the airplane window at the clouds below, watching them shift and change like her thoughts, feeling the weight of doubt and longing pressing down on her chest, wondering if she was making a mistake, if she was overreacting, if Ethan's intentions were truly innocent, or if she had been blind to warning signs she had ignored for months. And she couldn't stop remembering the playful tone of the messages, the heart emoji, the strange familiarity in his words, wondering why she felt this sharp ache in her chest, why the idea of someone else being part of his life in a way she never knew about hurt so much. And as the plane descended over Denver, Claire felt her fingers clench in her lap, knowing that the truth was waiting for her somewhere beyond the doors of Ethan's apartment, and whether it would heal her or shatter her, she couldn't yet know. She arrived in the city with her heart pounding, dragging her suitcase through the streets, feeling the cold December air bite at her cheeks, every step taking her closer to the apartment where she hoped answers would wait, and she rehearsed the words she might say, the questions she might ask, the tone she might keep, trying to stay calm while every heartbeat screamed at her, warning her of heartbreak, betrayal and disappointment, but also whispering that she might finally understand the situation, finally confront the uncertainty that had poisoned her peace for days. Standing outside Ethan's building, she felt a mix of fear and determination, her hand hovering over the buzzer as if pressing it could change the outcome, and when the door opened and Ethan appeared with surprise on his face, his blue eyes widening, she felt a rush of relief and tension, knowing this was the moment where everything could shift, where the truth would spill out, where the trust between them could be broken or repaired. Before she could speak, she noticed movement behind him, a girl with messy brown hair holding a pink notebook, shyly stepping back, and Claire's heart dropped as questions collided with fear. The sight of someone else connected to Ethan in a way she had feared sending her mind into overdrive, imagining every possible scenario, every possible betrayal, every explanation she hadn't yet considered, but she stayed silent, forcing herself to breathe, forcing herself to listen, forcing herself to wait as Ethan stammered, "Claire, this isn't what it looks like." And the girl behind him, Emily, whispered nervously, "Maybe I should go." But Claire shook her head softly, feeling the mix of emotions, anger, fear, heartbreak, and the faintest hope that there might still be an explanation, because she wanted answers, she wanted honesty, she wanted to understand why this pink notebook had become a symbol of doubt and longing, and she felt the air between them tense, charged with anticipation, knowing that the next words would either heal the cracks that had formed in her heart or make them impossible to repair. And as she took a slow breath, she realized that whatever came next, she would face it fully, without turning away, without pretending, because Claire had learned that sometimes waiting for the truth was more painful than facing it, and tonight, standing in the hallway of Ethan's apartment, she was ready to confront the storm she had feared for so long. Claire's mind raced non-stop after seeing the mysterious messages, every thought spinning faster than the last as she tried to convince herself that maybe she was overthinking, that Ethan was just joking, that it was nothing serious, but the knot in her chest refused to loosen, making every small sound, every vibration of her phone feel like a warning bell. She walked around her apartment, gripping her coffee cup too tightly, staring out the window at the gray Seattle sky, feeling restless and trapped, wishing she could escape the uncertainty that clung to her like a shadow, and she couldn't shake the images of Ethan's messages from her mind, the strange familiarity in the words, the playful tone that somehow felt intimate, that somehow felt like a space that had once belonged to her alone, and she tried to focus on work, opening her laptop and staring at design sketches and colors, but the colors seemed dull, the shapes felt meaningless, every task became a reminder of how far her thoughts had drifted, and she found herself scrolling through her phone. Again, seeing no new messages, feeling a temporary relief followed immediately by fresh worry, imagining all sorts of possibilities of what the messages could mean and who the mysterious person behind them was. And it wasn't long before she realized she couldn't continue like this, pretending everything was fine while her heart thumped with questions she didn't yet know how to answer. During lunch, she met her best friend Mia at the small cafe down the street, and Mia noticed immediately how tense Claire was, how her eyes darted constantly to her phone, how her hands trembled slightly as she sipped her coffee, and Mia asked softly but directly, "Claire, what's going on? You seem off." And Claire hesitated, afraid to speak the truth out loud, but she also knew she couldn't keep this bottled up because Mia had been her rock through so many moments of doubt and worry. So she showed her the messages, the first strange one about the pink notebook, the emoji that had followed, and Mia's expression softened with concern, her brows knitting together as she whispered, "Claire, are you sure you're okay?" And Claire felt a mix of relief and panic, relief because she was finally sharing her burden with someone she trusted, panic because now it felt real, like she had stepped closer to something she didn't want to see but had to face, and she told Mia everything she knew so far, trying to explain the confusing tone, the strange words, the little details that didn't fit with the Ethan she knew, but even as she spoke, she felt the unease grow inside her, a quiet alarm that wouldn't go away. After lunch, back at the studio, Claire tried to work, but each email, notification and message ping made her heart jump, each passing hour reminding her that she had no answers, only questions, and finally, the thought came to her like a whisper she couldn't ignore. She needed to see for herself, she needed to know the truth, and if Ethan had been hiding something, she had to face it now, before it grew into something irreversible. And the idea terrified her, made her palms sweat and her chest tighten, but the fear of not knowing hurt more than the fear of finding out, So she made a decision that shocked her. She booked a last-minute flight to Denver to confront him, typing her information quickly, her fingers trembling, her mind full of doubts and imagined conversations, thinking of what she might say, what she might see, how he might react, and even as she confirmed her ticket, a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear coursed through her, a feeling that she was stepping into a storm she could not control but could not ignore either. During the flight, Claire stared out the window at the clouds passing by, each one shifting like her thoughts, her heart beating fast as she rehearsed the confrontation over and over in her mind, imagining Ethan's surprise, imagining his explanation, imagining the girl she feared might exist, imagining the pink notebook in every detail she had seen in the messages. And the more she imagined, the more her stomach twisted, a mix of dread and longing that made it impossible to focus on anything else, and she realized that for the first time in a long while, her life depended on a single moment, on a single conversation, on a single truth, and that weight made her feel both powerful and helpless at the same time. Landing in Denver, the crisp evening air hit her, and she felt her resolve stiffen, dragging her suitcase through streets she barely knew, feeling both foreign and familiar at the same time, rehearsing her words silently as her heart pounded faster with each step, imagining the door opening and seeing Ethan, imagining his face when he realized she was there, imagining the girl behind him if there was one, imagining answers that might hurt, imagining answers that might heal, and she knew she had to face all of it because she could no longer live with the uncertainty. Standing in front of Ethan's apartment building, she hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the buzzer, her breath shallow as she tried to steady herself, and when the door opened and Ethan appeared, surprise flickering across his face, blue eyes widening in shock, Claire felt a strange mix of relief and tension, knowing this was the moment where the truth would finally come out, where the calm before the storm ended, and she noticed movement behind him, a young woman holding a pink notebook stepping back nervously, and Claire's heart dropped further, questions and fear colliding in her mind as she tried to remain composed, feeling the weight of betrayal and the possibility of misunderstanding equally heavy. Ethan rushed to speak, words spilling out in a hurried attempt to explain, but Claire held up her hand, needing to hear everything, needing the truth, and the girl behind him, Emily, whispered that maybe she should leave, sensing the tension, but Claire shook her head, wanting the full story, needing to understand why this pink notebook had become the symbol of doubt and unease that had shadowed her mind for days, and she felt her chest tighten as Ethan began to explain, each word a thread that could either repair or unravel the trust they had built over years, knowing that the next moments would decide if their relationship could survive or if the cracks had grown too deep to mend, feeling the storm of emotion rising inside her, a mix of fear, anger, longing, and hope, all in a single heartbeat, and even as she stood there, ready to listen, ready to face the answers, she knew this was only the beginning, that confronting the truth would be harder than imagining it, that her heart could break or heal in the next few minutes, and that no matter what happened, she would never be the same again. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt a quiet strength, a determination to face the storm, to demand honesty, to fight for clarity, because living in doubt was no longer an option. And tonight, standing in the hallway of Ethan's apartment, with the pink notebook in sight and two people she loved and feared before her, Claire was ready to confront the storm she had avoided for too long, to finally hear the truth no matter how painful, no matter how shocking, and to decide what her heart would do next. Claire took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions rushing through her chest as she stood in Ethan's apartment doorway, her eyes fixed on him and the girl holding the pink notebook, her mind racing with every possible scenario, every worst-case possibility, knowing that this moment could change everything between them. And she forced herself to speak, her voice steady despite the trembling she felt inside, asking Ethan to explain everything, to tell her why this girl was there, what the notebook meant, and why she had never heard of her before. And Ethan, looking caught between guilt and urgency, ran a hand through his hair and started to explain, stammering at first, then faster as the words poured out, telling Claire that the girl, Emily, was an intern at his company who had been struggling with a project, that she had shown him her notebook to get feedback and guidance, that the messages she had seen were playful jokes they exchanged about the project and her ideas, nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate, that he had never intended for Claire to see them, and that he had been so focused on helping Emily that he hadn't realized he was neglecting the emotional space Claire needed. And Claire's heart twisted as she listened, a mix of relief and lingering doubt fighting inside her, because the explanation made sense logically, but emotionally it still stung to see someone else so close to him, someone who had captured attention and time that she believed belonged to her. And as Ethan continued to speak, trying to reassure her, Emily quietly added her own words, apologizing for any misunderstanding, insisting that she never intended to come between them and that her admiration for Ethan had always been professional. And Claire nodded, taking in every word, her mind replaying the past few days, the messages, the heart emojis, the strange tone, realizing that her fears had magnified the situation in her head, that she had imagined betrayal where there had been none. Yet even as relief crept in, the hurt of feeling excluded, of being unaware, of not being prioritized remained, a quiet ache she could not ignore, and she stepped further inside the apartment, closing the door behind her, feeling the tension press around her like the walls themselves understood the storm she had walked through. And she listened as Ethan admitted that he had been distant, that his focus on work and helping Emily had distracted him from Claire, that he hadn't meant to make her feel abandoned, that he loved her, that she was the person he wanted to be with. And Claire's eyes stung with tears as the words sank in, the fear of loss mingling with the warmth of reassurance, the heartbreak mingling with hope, as she realized that love sometimes falters not because of betrayal, but because of neglect, because of misaligned attention, because of the small moments when one person is unintentionally left behind. And she understood that this confrontation, though painful, had brought clarity, that honesty, however uncomfortable, had the power to heal and rebuild, that the pink notebook, once a symbol of doubt, could now become a symbol of transparency, of boundaries, of lessons learned. And Claire took a shaky breath, feeling the tension slowly release from her shoulders, allowing herself to see Ethan not as a threat, not as someone who had hurt her intentionally, but as a man who had stumbled in his care, someone who was willing to explain, willing to apologize, willing to put effort into their relationship. And she realized that love, real love, required patience, communication, and forgiveness, and she had both the courage and the desire to give it a chance, even as the emotions swirled within her, a mixture of lingering fear, cautious hope, and undeniable affection. And Ethan reached for her hand tentatively, asking her to trust him again, asking her to allow him the chance to make up for the distance, for the worry, for the sleepless nights she had endured wondering about messages she now knew were innocent. And Claire's throat tightened, her eyes watering, her heart beating fast, because she wanted to believe him, wanted to hold on to the man she loved, but she also knew that trust, once shaken, needed time to rebuild, that words alone were not enough, that actions mattered more. And she looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the guilt in his expression, the honesty in every gesture, and she allowed herself to take the first step toward forgiveness, toward understanding, toward rebuilding the connection that had been strained by doubt. And as they stood there, the air around them thick with emotion, Claire realized that this was a turning point, a moment where the story of their relationship could continue with more awareness, more care, more attention to each other's needs. And she felt a small spark of hope, a tiny flame that told her it was possible to move past fear and uncertainty, to reclaim trust, to nurture love. And yet, the ache in her heart reminded her that healing would take time, that moments of doubt might still arise, that communication must remain honest and open. And she resolved silently to speak whenever she felt left out, whenever distance crept in, whenever the shadow of uncertainty appeared, knowing that proactive honesty could prevent misunderstandings like this from taking root again. And as Ethan spoke softly, asking questions about how she felt, what she needed, how they could make their relationship stronger, Claire felt a swell of emotion, feeling both fragile and strong at once, realizing that vulnerability was part of love, that expressing hurt did not make her weak, that demanding honesty did not make her controlling, that love required courage from both sides. And she began to see the situation differently, understanding that while messages and notebooks could cause fear and tension, what mattered most was the intention behind them, the willingness to explain, the choice to rebuild. And she felt the tension shift subtly, the walls between them lowering, the fear giving way to cautious relief, as she allowed herself to accept Ethan's words, yet still with care, still with awareness, still with a heart open to truth and honesty. And she finally spoke, voice trembling but firm, asking him to promise that she would always be a priority, that they would always communicate openly, that secrets, even innocent ones, would not grow between them. And Ethan nodded, holding her hands, meeting her gaze, promising to be better, to listen more, to be present, to never let a misunderstanding grow into fear again. And Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief, love, and tentative hope, knowing that while the journey ahead would require patience, effort, and understanding, the foundation was still strong, that their love had endured distance, miscommunication, and doubt, and now, after the confrontation, after the explanation, after seeing the pink notebook in context, after hearing Ethan's truth, she felt the first real sense of clarity in days, the first real chance to breathe without the constant gnawing of fear, the first glimpse of a path forward, where love could continue to grow, where trust could be rebuilt, where mistakes could be acknowledged and forgiven. And as she looked at Ethan and at Emily, stepping back quietly, understanding that her role was only to clarify and not interfere, Claire felt a mixture of emotions: gratitude for clarity, sorrow for the worry she endured, relief for the truth, and hope for the future. And she realized that this confrontation, painful as it was, had been necessary, had been transformative, and had allowed them to see each other in truth, to understand boundaries, to appreciate honesty, to recognize that love could survive miscommunication if both hearts were willing. And as they finally stood together in the apartment, the tension slowly easing, Claire knew that while forgiveness would take time, the first step had been taken, the conversation had been had, the misunderstanding had been clarified, and love, fragile but real, remained, giving her hope that despite fear, doubt, and uncertainty, they could rebuild stronger than before, learning that the true test of love was not avoiding mistakes, but facing them together, openly, honestly, and with hearts willing to understand.